Good evening, everyone. Just want to make sure this microphone works. Great. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay, good. Well, welcome everybody to the town of Concord's annual Holocaust
Recording in progress.
Remembrance. This is being recorded for your information and will be available on the Concord Carlisle Human Rights Council website. The Concord Carlisle Human Rights Council co-sponsors this event. My name is Richie Armatino. I'm the co-chair along with Shari Barzan of the Human Rights Council. Before we introduce our keynote speaker, Sarah, Matt Johnson will open with some comments. He's the chair of the select board. And then Rosalie Jarrett will also provide some comments. And then I'll introduce Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So, this past Wednesday, Concord marked the 248th anniversary of its rebellion against a repressive government. However, that same day was also the 80th anniversary of a far more existential fight, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Realizing that the Nazi regime was moving to annihilate their community, Jewish leaders refused to surrender to the police commander, and resistance groups counterattacked against impossible odds. Warsaw's civilian freedom fighters were not as fortunate as Concord's Minutemen. 13,000 Jews were killed in the struggle, and most who survived were later exterminated in concentration camps. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising may seem far away to us in Concord. In all its 140,000 plus days of existence, our town has only witnessed a single day of armed conflict. Our forefathers' dispute over taxation and representation cannot begin to compare with the horrors of state-sponsored genocide. So what lesson does this shared date in our history offer? I turn to Hirsch Glick, who was inspired by the uprising to write these concluding lines in his famous poem. One generation comes into this world to be blessed with days of peace and safety. Another travels through the valley of the shadow, enduring the cruelties of hatred, persecution, and war. And we are united, generations past, present, and future, in the bonds of memory. It's in that spirit that I present this proclamation from the town of Concord, which declares that the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and that we, the people of Concord, should always remember the terrible events of the Holocaust and the genocides in Armenia, Cambodia, Bosnia, Rwanda, and Darfur. We all have a duty to use these memories as a catalyst to rid us of racial hatred, intolerance, tyranny, and discrimination. And with that, I will turn over the microphone.
Thank you so much. My great aunt and uncle were killed in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising along with their families. Okay, I'll speak like this. I was just responding that my great aunt and uncle and their children and the great family, they were killed in Warsaw Ghetto, so it really touches me. And I want to thank you Concord, for holding this event every year. So I thought to myself, what can I say? Why do we remember the Holocaust? You certainly put that forward as well. And I have a quote, George Santayana, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And what I do is I work with, for 20 years, people on the side of the Nazis and the side of survivors together. Some of them have been here. And we look at what happened in Germany. They had kings, they had pain, loss, the Weimar Republic, beginning of democracy that fell apart. But they had, in the 1920s, they had freedom. They had LGBT freedom. Women were free to wear pants and ride bikes and do their hair the way they wanted, and things were then deep financial problems, and Hitler began activities with National Socialism. I just learned that some of the elites in Germany liked the idea of socialism because they thought that would be equality. So they were misled. And some were attracted to the order he was saying he would do. And when I met with some of the Germans, one who had served in the army, he told us how people could be drawn in by dangerous, ruthless leaders. He and many of his generation were raised by parents who were following the book by Dr. Harrar, who loved Hitler and said, you have to be tough to your kids, break the will of the child. So they grew up with feeling lost, feeling unloved, feeling pain. And this man said, when they heard Hitler tell them, you're the master race, I love you, you're wonderful, they followed him because they found a parent. Something to remember, that although many groups can offer a sense of belonging and self-confidence and camaraderie, some groups can be harmful to others and to themselves. I learned more from a man named Tony McAleer, who was working with the neo-Nazis in Canada, rising in power. When he had a baby, he looked in the eyes and he started to change. And what he dedicates himself is to pulling people out of this toxic shame. And the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, one of the men who led it, he warned, democracy cannot permit any evil, even the smallest one, because it can grow in the blink of an eye. I believe that we are here on a mission on this earth to wrestle with difficult feelings of fear, anger, pain, and grief. We have free will. We can create music and writings out of sadness. We can be artists, put our rage into art, dance through our anger, and seek healing to change our lives for the good. And the ways people have been expressing negative feelings have killed too many innocents, and the earth too has suffered. Isn't it time to try other ways? I'm reminded of the phrase, arguments for the sake of heaven. People can have different viewpoints, but if they seek the truth together, these arguments do not need to culminate in conflict, war, or the horrors of genocide. It's my hope that people divided by conflict, war, and genocide will be inspired to join together, seek truth, and use our God-given gifts to bring balance to the world and live up to the promise of never again. And of course, we need things in the world. People in conflicts, the words aren't enough. We have action to protect them and help them so armed attacks can cease. We need nourishing food, medical supplies, education. Teachers, religious leaders, mental health workers can not only convey information, they can support young people to avoid mistakes that lead to hateful acts. We must, if we are to call ourselves human, grapple with the myriad lessons that history calls upon us to learn. We must never forget, this is Dr. Viktor Frankl, that we may also find meaning in life even when confronted with a hopeless situation, when facing a fate that cannot be changed. For what then matters is to bear witness to the uniquely human potential at its best, which is to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to turn one's predicament into a human achievement. We are no longer able to change a situation, and we're challenged to change ourselves. And a few quotes that I think are quite beautiful. This is from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Atonement and forgiveness are the supreme expressions of human freedom, the freedom to act differently in the future what one did in the past, and the freedom not to be trapped in a cycle of vengeance and retaliation. Only those who can atone and forgive can be free. Only a civilization based on forgiveness can construct a future that is not an endless repetition of the past. And now a quote from Eddie Hilsum, a Dutch Jewish diarist who perished in Auschwitz. True peace will come only when every individual finds peace within himself or herself, when we have all vanquished and transformed our hatred for our fellow human beings or whatever race, even into love one day. And may we be blessed on our journeys and continue to support one another as we bring the gifts of our inner light and become messengers to help uplift the world around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalie. Thank you, Matt. Rosalie is also the cantor at Kerem Shalom, and she'll be singing a song after Sarah gives her presentation. This year, we are honored to welcome Sarah Cohen, a member of Concord Kerem Shalom. Sarah was born in Athens, Greece, to parents who had survived the Holocaust. The Cohens emigrated to the United States in 1956 and settled in Boston. Sarah was an art teacher and a grant writer in the Boston Public Schools for 32 years and was the recipient of a Fulbright Fellowship. In her retirement, she began a second career creating documentaries, specializing in interviewing Holocaust survivors in an effort to memorialize their stories. Her documentaries have been featured in local cable TV programs and were presented in numerous venues: Boston, New York, Athens, and Israel. Sarah will share her family stories and reflect on the growing up in Boston area as a child of Holocaust survivors and as an immigrant from Greece. Please join me in welcoming Sarah.
Thank you for coming today in such terrible weather. I have a book here that I co-wrote with two ladies in the audience. And the reason I want to read to you a poem here, because this has a lot to do with the stories that I lived in Greece as a child coming out. My theory is that all of us have stories, but if you don't write them and share them, they're just memories in your head. So you really have to think maybe about writing your own stories, because that's the only way you can pass them down. What I'd like to read to you is called Hide and Seek. When I lived in Greece, I was born in Athens. We lived right near Acropolis. In fact, the hills right across from my house were the same hills that all the famous orators walked. Sophocles, Socrates, all those guys used to walk right across from my house. And it's funny because we learned about them in school, and because we had no sense of timing, we thought that we had just missed them by, a couple of years. Later, I found out that wasn't the case. So this poem that I want to read to you is very meaningful for me because there was a playground right across the street, and that was the greatest thing that our street had. At nighttime it closed, there were gates there. And in this playground that we used to go and play with all my friends who were born at the same time that I was born in 1948, we often wondered, why aren't there any older kids in this playground? There weren't any kids that were like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 years older than us. And we would see photographs in relatives' homes of entire families in black and white, including children. And we would ask, who are these people? And they'd say, well, they were taken. It was always that word, taken. Well, where were they taken, we would ask as we got older. Where they were taken to another place. And I said, well, why didn't they come back? And they said, oh, no, they never came back. So we always had a question about what happened to the whole generation of children. And in this poem, I address that. It's called Hide and Seek. The game of hide and seek was on. We shrieked when caught and laughed to run and find the others. The ones before us didn't laugh. They hid with siblings under stairs and closets. Don't make a sound, they said, or we'll be caught. They were the lost ones, the ones before us, the ones we saw in photos peering out silently on somber walls. Our elders didn't see them, stop and shy, feel their absence, but want us children, born after the war, to live, enjoy our lives without the fear or memory of that day in March in 1944, when the war was raging and the Jews of Greece were being hunted down and caught. It was sunny on that day in March the 24th, a Friday, just before the storm. Don't go out today, they're told. We heard rumors, something isn't right, and stay at home. And if you see soldiers marching by, you hide. You remember where, and take the small ones. You're in charge. We'll be back soon. Just to the synagogue, our place of worships. But the Germans command us there all together today, all of us. Only the children stay behind. In homes that are on the Gestapo list, they know. Hours later, they did come back, but as prisoners in German trucks, Gestapo in command, searching house to house for the young ones, trying to hide under the stairs, in the closets, who heard their mothers' cries, hide. But they were caught, like thousands of others, with grandparents on their canes, with wailing babies in their arms, with all the loved ones in their lives swept up and gone. The game was over, their names echoing through the streets that day. They disappear in some strange land and die without a cause. And still their presence fills the playground air, just across the street where they once played, on swings that wait for their return, where the next generation, children of my time, will swing high enough to launch out into the space and look down below, the small world that is ours, our labyrinth of streets in a small Jewish neighborhood where Sabbath was observed and mothers prepared for Friday nights and send out prayers that were not heard, where children just like us, our older cousins, played, scraped knees, and chased each other in a game of fun, a game of hide and seek, and we all lost. So that's the story of cousins of mine that I knew existed, but I never got to meet. The aunts, the uncles, you know, nobody had any grandparents. So when I was born in 1948, we were considered miracle children. Here you call them boomers. But in Greece, we were considered the miracle kids. We never knew why we were so special. It's just like we were so pampered. You know, it's like, oh my God, you know, you have a child, you know, as if, you know, we were accountable, you know, for something grand, you know, they had grand plans for us. And that was because there weren't any children that were born, you know, from the years 1941 all the way through 46 probably. And if they were, I mean, if the mothers were pregnant, they just didn't make it. And if the babies were very young, they couldn't go into hiding. All of my relatives who survived, and I do have a number who survived, my cousins who are still alive, they're the ones that I interview when I go back to Greece. They were hidden as children. You had to go into hiding. So on the particular day that I'm talking about in this, it was March 24th, 1944. Very significant because the Germans always like to pull surprises. And they told the Jews in my neighborhood that everyone had to be registered. You had to go in every Friday to the synagogue. You had to register. If you didn't register and they found you without your papers, they would shoot you. So my mother and my aunt and my father's twin brother did not register. They decided they were going to take their chances. And it was on that particular Friday that the Gestapo told everyone, show up at the synagogue today because you're going to be celebrating Passover in 2 weeks. We're going to give you flour for matzah. People bought that. They said, wow, you know, look at that. You know, we're being treated so well. We don't have to live in a ghetto. We don't wear the Star of David. They're not putting us in trains like they did all the Jews in Salonika a year before. Nobody knew what happened to them. You know, they're being really decent with us. It must be because we're Athenian Jews and we're special. Nobody was special. So on that particular day, all the neighbors in my neighborhood, of course I wasn't there then, that was 4 years before I was born, they all went to the synagogue extra early so that they could get their matzah flour. And that was the day that it was a sting operation. Whoever came to the temple, all of a sudden they were shoved in. The German trucks came around with soldiers, you know, with guns, and they held people captives, and they were waiting for the rest of family members to show up because they only had 300 people in there, but they had everyone's address. So with everyone's address, all they had to do was get into a car, a lorry, and drive up to your house and search your house and take you. My mother, from her neighbors, she was saved by her neighbors. They told her, they said, you have to run right now. We just heard, you know, one of the neighbors in that area where the synagogue is, come and tell us that they have all your people, so you have to leave right now. And my mother just left the house. She had, you know, she didn't have anything valuable. So she just left the house. My aunt, who had 2 young children, she had to put them in this makeshift carriage and also, you know, leave as soon as she could. And they did come looking for her because my neighbor, I'll show you pictures of her, she was a young girl then. She was 8 years old, but I asked her, I said, do you remember the day that they rounded up, all the Jewish people? She goes, yeah, they came into our house, they were looking, for Jews. And I said, well, what did you tell them? She said, we don't know where they are. So that was how a lot of people in my neighborhood escaped. And so after the war, my mother was able to come back and take charge of her house. You hear in other countries, people were not able to do that. They would go to Poland and they would be killed, because some neighbor would say, no, I own your house now. I have your business. I don't want you here. But Greece wasn't like that. They were a lot more flexible. And the Greeks also made it a law that if you're a Jewish person and you wanted to get a false ID at any police station, they would give you a false ID. My father was Isaac Cohen, and they gave him, I don't know, Michalis Mitropolis or something, so you just had to remember, what your name was. So that's in a nutshell the whole story. But what I'd like to share with you is how we got to Greece. I mean, what are Jews doing in Greece anyway, right? Shouldn't we have just stayed when the Romans burned down the Second Temple in Jerusalem? But Jews have been traveling all over the Mediterranean for centuries. I didn't know this, It took a lot of work to figure out how Jews got to Greece. It's not that far from Israel. If you've ever been to one place, an hour and 30-minute ride on a plane, will take you straight to Israel. And in those days, there were boats. That's how they got around. Even St. Paul, he walked from Tarsus. He walked all the way, if you can believe it, all the way over to Athens. And one thing that I like to tell Greeks, I really like to tease them, they say, how did Jews get in our country anyway? And I say, Paul? And they say, yeah. I said, well, really, his name was Shaul before he changed it. And that already, they don't like that. And I said, well, listen, I'll just call him Paul. I said, but he came to Athens. And they said, really? And why did he come to Athens? I asked them, and they say, to preach to the philosophers. And I said, hell no, they didn't want him there. He wanted to preach to the Jews. And where were the Jews? They had a synagogue, not far from our new synagogue in the Agora, because I lived in the area, where all the ancients were. So that's where Paul went to preach. And I guess the Jewish people didn't, listen to him either. So he went to Corinth, to a whole bunch of places. But I always found that interesting. Regarding what you're seeing here, this is where my mother's from. This is a beautiful island off, it's 24 hours by boat away from Athens. It's pretty far. And it's called the island of Lesbos. And so how did she get to Lesbos? I mean, they were the only Jewish family in the whole island. But to find out how she got there, and I hope I'm doing this right over here. Let me see. Does this go to the next one?
You can do, oops. No, you can do, I don't know how to get rid of that now.
Okay.
So just tap that.
Okay. So you can see how close everything is. If you lived in Jerusalem all the way down there at the bottom, you see Caesarea, you see Cyprus, that's really close. You can practically swim there. You see Tarsus, that's where Paul was from. But you see that whole area was so alive with commerce, with travel, with people traveling, it was just such an alive area. And my own family, actually, before Lesbos, was from was Smyrna. It's called Izmir now, but it was a very great seaport city, and there was so much going on. And that explains how, if you just look at the map, it's how my mother and her family, they ended up in Mytilene. Mytilene is the main city in Lesbos. Okay, this is the Great Fire. This is the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 AD. And that was the year that was very meaningful for the Jews that were still left in Jerusalem. They just had to get up and leave. Otherwise, they were all taken as slaves to Rome. So the ones that were able to get out, did so. It's interesting, when I had my DNA done, I found out I have no Greek in me at all, which I know I was surprised too. It shocked my Greek friends. They were very disappointed. It's actually 39% Italian, which means that my relatives were probably taken as slaves to Rome, or if they ever got to Spain, from Spain after the expulsion, a lot of Jews did go to Sicily, and that's what comes up in my DNA, that I'm actually from Sicily. So I've had to change a lot of friendships. Now I'm like this with the Italians. This is during the other expulsion in Spain, and it shows you the routes that the Jews took in 1492. It shows all the people that went to Rome, to Naples, to Sicily, and all of a sudden Athens makes sense, and so does Izmir, Smyrni. And you can see that those are the boat routes. This is what Mytilene, this is the main city in Lesbos, looked like. It was taken over by the Venetians. If you go there today, it's a beautiful island. Everything is Venetian architecture. It's quite startling, and they're famous for their olive groves, olive trees, their oil production. And that was actually was very important for my mother, because during the war, when she was looking for a place to hide, her best friend from the island sent her olive oil soap. Nobody could get soap during the war. They didn't have any. But her best friend sent her a big box of olive oil soap, along with a letter to introduce her to a family that would hide her. And that's how my mother was able to hide for almost 2 years. It was very progressive, the island of Lesbos. So I'm showing you a school in the center that was built in 1898. And amazingly, my mother's photo appears in the book about the school. She's right there. I don't know if I can point. She's right in the center. It's interesting that she was the only Jewish girl in the whole school. And as a result, when the others took religion, she, obviously she couldn't participate. But she recalled having the most wonderful time at that particular school. They learned all kinds of things that were important for young ladies, including, I loved her famous class was Theory of Men's Underwear. And I said, why did you have to learn that? And she goes, well, because the men couldn't go and buy shorts. The wife had to make them their underwear. That was one of her duties. This is a school today. It's just amazing that I went to the school. I took my own grown-up children. I wanted them to see their heritage. So last year we did a heritage tour. I took them to Izmir, and from there we went to Lesbos so they could see where their grandmother went to school, and that's them outside of the school. Adam is holding an apple. Okay, so what happens to when you have 3 girls in your family and they're grown up? Do you stay on the island of Lesbos and hope that they'll get a job? I mean, nobody worked. The ladies didn't work. What you needed was a dowry, and you needed men. So all 3 girls, my mother and her sister and her first cousin, they were taken to Athens in 1930. And they were introduced, to the Jewish society there, and as prospective brides. Now, my mother and her sister had to share a dowry, so they got money when they sold their house in Lesbos. The other lady was very wealthy. She became very wealthy. So the way that it works with a dowry, like the more money you have, the better groom you get. So she got the best groom, the most handsome, the richest of everyone. My aunt was older than my mother, and she got somebody less, somebody, not as handsome, but a very good man, an accountant. My mother waited too long, and as a result, she got caught in the war, and then the money that she had in the bank became worthless, because money had no value, and so she didn't have a dowry, so she couldn't get married until after the war. And that's why I was born in 1948, which is actually a good thing, right? Otherwise, I would have been 10 years older. Greece in 1930 was bubbling. It still is. It's still the same. Cafes everywhere. They introduced cars. They had big avenues, lots of stores. If you were wealthy, Greece was a great place to live. If you were poor, you could still have a pretty good life because everything took place outdoors. The air is free. The best beaches are in Greece, so you could always go swimming. You could stay out at cafes. This is a cafe at the corner of my street, actually. And now my whole area has been closed off to traffic because it's so close to the Acropolis. So all the stores, everything has really gained in value because if it's of its proximity to Acropolis. And these are some of the old cafes. This one shows you, my old house in Greece has a very strategic location. It is, if you see that arrow, there are two walls there that if you follow these walls, you will go right to the port of Piraeus. And right across the street from my house, there's a very, very big hill, and I'll show you later. From the hill, you can see the harbor. And I guess they used to climb up on the hill to see if the Persians were coming. And I think I was more afraid of the Persians than anybody else because, I would say, oh my God, I hope they don't come again. The Persians were always fighting with the Greeks. That was the biggest enemy. The second one were the Spartans. I had no desire to meet anybody from Sparta. I just thought that they were such awful people. This is St. Paul preaching to the Jews in the synagogue and some of the philosophers, I guess, but nobody was really paying attention. And they had a very nasty word for him, the philosophers. They called him polysporos, which means somebody that has too much to talk about, like a blabbermouth. But that's never been translated into English. I just thought I'd share that with you. This is an old synagogue from Corinth to prove that, Jews were around for so many years, 2,000. This is the view very close to my house where you can see the Acropolis and all the hills, the cypress trees that lead up to the top. This is one of my favorite locations. It was very popular and still is to have outdoor theaters. Everybody loves that in the summertime. And the weather, it never rains. So from May through September, you can be outdoors at a theater. This is the view from right across my house, the hill that I was telling you about. You can see another very large hill, Lycabettas Hill, that has a church on top. If you want to go to one of the islands, it's very easy. You just take the train to Piraeus, and then you see all these boats that are leaving. You just jump on a boat. This is what we did when we were 20. You jump on a boat and get off. If you don't like that island, you wait for another boat. You go to a different island, but the water is like that. It's just so beautiful. This is my street in Greece. On the right-hand side, at the bottom of the hill is my house. On the left is the playground. This is my street again, and it shows you, it was a Jewish neighborhood. Well, it was mixed. It was very mixed, and that's one of the reasons that my mother was able to escape with her life, because she had made a lot of very good friendships with her Christian neighbors, and they warned her. This is how it looks today. A lot of abandoned houses are still there in my neighborhood. Some of them were never claimed. The owners never came back, and a certain number of years have to go by, and Greeks have very strict laws about, who can purchase them. I tried to purchase my own house for years, and I wasn't able to, so it was kind of a lost cause. This is my house. We lived on the first floor. This is how it looks today, not inhabitable. So I heard from my neighbor that the other neighbor, she pleaded her case, saying how dangerous my house was, that it could topple over into hers. And so for that reason, she was allowed to buy it. So the house will get knocked down pretty soon, I guess. This is the doorway to a little atrium garden. And this is my mother and my grandmother in the little atrium garden. This is about a month before the Germans rounded up all the Jews. My grandmother was very sick there. And my mother always told me that if her mother had not died, when she did, she wouldn't have abandoned her. She would have stayed with her, and that would have been, the end of her life. Mardi Gras, there are a lot of holidays. It's interesting how the Jewish neighbors celebrated so many of the Christian holidays right along with their neighbors, and this is a Mardi Gras. Everyone's in costume. And again, my mother, our neighbor, is the second lady. I'm friends with her daughter now. Third lady is my aunt. And it's a close shot of my mother. Okay, so the war's over. My mother and father finally negotiate some kind of a dowry, and I'm born, and I joined the other children, and being those special kids. That's a work in my father's factory. My father used to have a brush making factory. After the war, though, it never did well because industrialization came in, and people that had enough money just invested in machines that could make brushes. This is interesting because this is my Hebrew school, the Jewish school in Athens, and you can see the ages of the kids. The kids in the second row had to have been hidden children because they're all about 5 or 6 years older than us. This is kindergarten, so we're all 5, the kids in the first row. And this is me doing what I'm doing today, giving a speech on I don't know what. This is graduation. We graduated. Every holiday was so celebrated. They told us that we needed white dresses. All the mothers did their best, even though everybody was poor, to go find white material and hire seamstress, so you could fit in, so, you look good, because all these parents, like, we were it. This is my second grade class. This is right before I left Greece, and we had decided that we were going to try our luck in the States. And this is, you can tell it's a field trip where we go out and we collect pussy willows. Yeah, that's what we're holding. And it's funny because in later photos, and I hope I have time to show you, there's a photo of my classmates that I got together with 60 years later. And they didn't have this picture for some reason. I had it. Again, this is my class. I'm looking at the time now. This is our synagogue. We had 2, one right across from the other. And I think if our time is up, I can stop here and take questions, or if you want, I can just show you some more. Oh, this is a photo. We had to convince the American government that we were worthy of coming to this country. We were all healthy, we could work. And so that was the photograph that Americans looked at, and they said, oh, wow, okay, they look like they're a good threesome, We'll get some good years out of them.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. If anyone has questions, we're going to ask you to use the microphone for the recording, for the sake of the recording. So just raise your hand and I can come by and hand it over.
Should I show you
How could
anything
that-
else, or do you want?
Yeah, if there are no questions now, please keep,
Okay.
maybe,
Our
wrap up.
passport, three people to a passport to come to the States. And then this is living in the States. The joke is that we got here to Boston August 31st. September 1st, my father said, okay, I've seen enough, let's just pack our bags, call it a day, and go back. But they never went back. This is the first time we went back. My mother and I went when I was 15, so from 8 to 15, there was a big change. And when we went back to Greece, it was just shocking how everything had changed. This is the war years, and I can quickly go through these. Greece did not want to be in the war, but they were invaded in the north by the Italians who wanted to come in through Greece, and the Greece fought valiantly, but in the end, they had to give up. These are some of the stories that I'm doing, memoirs of hidden children. that I have already done a program on.
Some questions from online, so Chris is going to open up the mic now. There is someone online. with a
Oh,
question.
okay.
Hello, my name is Manu, and my question is, as a young childhood, how was the life of a young girl um, 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 who had like nice parents who tried to do some nice labor working? Like, what kind of jobs were there?
Okay, in answer to what kind of jobs my parents had, my father was told that he would have an office job. That was ridiculous because he didn't speak the language. He wasn't a lawyer. Actually, he worked on an elevator. He ran the elevator. He had to memorize 10 numbers, 1 through 10. And that job only lasted a week because my father was one of these proud Greek men, and he didn't like when people got in and they said 5 or 6, He didn't like that, so he would take them on the wrong floor. And they or he didn't line up the elevator correctly with the floor. So that was it. So it was that kind of work. This is, if you ever go to Greece, this is the Jewish Museum in Athens. This is a must-see because they have all the information that you need, all the photos, and this shows you the Acropolis during the war, what happened, how it was taken over by the Gestapo. I'm going to finish with this final photo because I think it's very important to note that my mother and her entire group of friends, most of them perished, are in that same exact location, at the Acropolis. And this is like during the war when the Athenian Greeks thought that the Athenian Jews thought that they were safe. And they weren't, it was just right around the corner. So, yes.
I can speak loudly if necessary. For the recording. I remember you telling a story. Was it your uncle in the, was it at one of the camps?
Yes.
And I think that was a very moving story. It might
Let me see if I have his picture. Yeah, that's my father on the left and my uncle on the right. They're twins. So one, my father's twin, Haim, on the right, was married and he had a child, and he wanted to do what he felt was the safest thing. So when he was told by the Germans that were occupying Athens that you have to come and register as a Jew, he did that. My father was single, and he had nothing to lose. He says, well, if they kill me, they kill me, And so he did not register. And their mother, they said to them, don't both do the same thing, do opposite things because one of you will be lost. And it was my uncle, who was lost. And I actually found out later about him. He was in a group of an uprising. The only ones that uprose in Auschwitz were the Greek Jews. There were 135 of them. They could communicate easily by speaking Greek to each other. They were able to squirrel away some dynamite. One of the ladies used to work in, bullet factory. So they got dynamite, and their plan was that they were going to blow up 4 of the crematoria. They only blew up 1, but they managed to throw in a few of the guards. And of course, they were all caught, and they were all executed. But they got to do something that they felt was heroic. The inmates were wearing, blue and white pajamas, and the Greek flag is blue and white, so they tore up one of their pajamas, and they fashioned a Greek flag with a cross, and they held it up, and they said, we lived as, proud Greek Jews, and we will die that way, so kill us. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for your stories tonight. I am going to introduce Rosalie Garut again. She's going to sing a song for us.
Thank you, Sarah. As a fellow daughter of survivors, you touch my heart. Mine were from Poland and Lithuania. A song. I pray you'll be our eyes and watch us where we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe. I pray we'll find your light and hold it in our hearts. When stars go out each night, remind us where you are. Let this be our prayer when shadows fill our day. Help us find a place, guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be safe. We ask that life be kind and watch us from above. We hope each soul will find another soul to love. Let this be our prayer, just like every child who needs to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be safe. Help us find a place, guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be safe.
Thank you, Rosalie. Hello, everyone. My name is Shari Barzin. I'm one of the co-chairs with Rich at the Concord Carlisle Human Rights Council. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening here at the Townhouse and on Zoom. Thank you, Sarah, for inspiring us with your stories. We wish we had more time. Thank you again, Rosalie, for your beautiful music. Thank you to the Select Board and to the Town of Concord for co-sponsoring this event with us. And a very special thank you to Chris Carmody for all his work on the Holocaust remembrance over the years with us. Thank you, Minuteman Media Network, for broadcasting and taping tonight's presentation. We will have a recording of it available for viewing on our website, cchumanrights.org. And a very special thank you to our event coordinators, Ronnie Olitsky and Sarah Napier. They do an amazing job every year. If you would like to learn more about the Human Rights Council, we have a sign-up sheet at the door to be on our mailing list, or you can visit our website, cchumanrights.org. All of our contact information is on a brochure we have right next to the sign-up sheet on the mailing list, right by the door. Please feel free to take one on your way out. Sarah has copies of her book, 5 Artist Writers, tonight for sale, and if you would like to purchase one, she'd be happy to autograph it for you. Please wait till everyone is finished getting up from their chairs and come up to the table if you'd like to purchase one. We also have information where you can get it online if you'd like to do that. Thank you again for joining us, coming out this evening. Thank you for remembering. Safe travels home. Good evening.